Hi everybody, good evening, and welcome again to another Indivisible Sacramento monthly meeting. You know, we just passed a fairly inauspicious milestone, or anniversary, I guess would be a better word. Yeah. Is the 16th anniversary of the beginning of the Iraq War. Hundreds of thousands of people killed, trillions of dollars spent, and an entire region destabilized, and innumerable political consequences. Honestly, as much as our organization is dedicated to fighting against Donald Trump, he's never done anything nearly that destructive, although he's tried. It's really a reminder of the stakes of what we're up against sometimes. So. On a more positive note, I see a lot of familiar faces here. That's a good sign. People keep coming back. Do we have anyone who's new, who's never been here before, that wants to say hello? Hi there. Would you like to say hi or talk about what brought you here today, or what you're interested in?
Pat invited me to come.
Well, thank you, Pat.
And my name is Ruth.
Hi, Ruth.
Hi.
Anything in particular you're interested in, or just coming to see what it's all about?
Nothing right at the moment.
Okay. Anyone else new? I always like to put people on the spot and make everybody stare at you for a little bit at the beginning. Well, we have a great meeting planned tonight. One of the most important issues on everybody's minds when we did the little survey back at the beginning of the year was freedom of the press and the importance of journalism in the modern day. So we're really happy to have a guest from Capital Public Radio here tonight to talk about some of those issues. First, I wanted to present a brief announcement. We have Justin Tweet from 350 to Sacramento here. Our meeting next month is going to focus on climate change, but he actually has a brief announcement about something that's coming up right now. So Justin, would you like to come on up?
Yeah. Good evening. I'm Justin Tweet. I'm a board member with 350 Sacramento, who's been working on climate change here in the region. And I just wanted to come and let you guys know about an upcoming event that we're hosting. I didn't bring flyers, unfortunately. My printer is broken, but it's called Fast Track to Carbon Zero. The idea of this event is we're trying to speed up our transition to carbon zero and sort of decarbonize, as the term goes. And the event is going to be held on April 13th at the Sacramento Community College, starting at 9 a.m. and wrapping up at about 4. We're really excited about the event. We're hoping to inspire and energize the community to get behind this effort. There'll be a lot of information in terms of why climate change is an urgent issue. We'll have a couple of panels talk about what's happening currently in our region on climate change, as well as what we need to do to speed up the transition. There also will be some interactive components to the session, as well as a breakout at the end. We'll have several different breakout groups that will focus on different ways people can get involved in the climate change movement. There'll be a youth breakout group, so if you know any youth in the community, that's been one of the really exciting things that's been happening with climate change lately, is the youth becoming more active. But we'll also have a breakout group on climate emergency resolution that SAC Climate Coalition is leading, and a number of other ways and breakouts groups that we're working on. So let's see. It also, I don't know if SAC Indivisible is interested in, we have different endorser or sponsor levels for our event, starting with just an enthusiast, which is a $50 fee to get a statement in our program, all the way up to higher level sponsorships. But the event really isn't about raising money for 350. It's more about getting the community involved in the movement and making progress. So, are there any questions at all about the event?
I just want to let people know that there's a link to all of this on the website. On the events page is a link, and I think it's also on the event, the little list of upcoming events that you picked up on the way in. So there's more
Yes.
information out there on that event.
Yes, thank you. Our website is 350sacramento.org, and you can go there and find out more about it.
And you can go to our website, and it'll link you to that website.
Or that, yes. Yeah.
What is the cost of this particular event, the one at Sac Community College?
It is, we tried to make the costs the least expensive as possible because we didn't want that to be a barrier for anyone to come out, and it's not. So it's a sliding scale. If you can't pay anything, then you don't pay anything. But we're trying to cover our costs. The event will include a free lunch. So we have a sliding scale that goes anywhere from $5 to $15 for the event. Yeah.
I'd like to know if you have any representatives there from a project called Schools for Climate Action. They're trying to get climate action resolutions from school boards to be presented to Congress.
Schools for Climate Action?
Yeah, there's a website,
Okay.
and the man who runs it is named Park Guthrie. He's down in Palo Alto.
Okay. I will check on that. I don't know for sure, but we're putting an emphasis on getting youth out as well as other underserved communities.
You might want to talk with him. I'm working on it here in Sacramento.
Okay.
So I'll talk to him.
Yeah, that sounds great. Pat?
Yeah, I just want to say that I'm going to that event. And the reason why I'm going to that event is that I'm getting more involved in climate activism. I need to understand where the leverage points are, who the players are, and where the potential is locally. What I understand was that one of the prior forums, some of the local elected officials from this area attended that forum, and maybe it's coincidental, but later they were using language that mapped to the language they probably learned at this forum. So I believe that it's been an effective tool for changing the urgency and the effectiveness, and that's why I'm going to go.
Yeah, this is our signature event. I won't be here to promote all of 350's events, but this is one that we hold about every year and a half, and we put a lot of effort and energy into it. It's not about our organization, really. It's about the movement. And so the last event, we had about 200 participants. Mayor Steinberg gave the open remarks. And since then, he's, as many of you know, kicked off a Mayor's Climate Commission to move towards the goal that we are asking him to move to. So we like to think we had something to do with that. Okay.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Thanks, Justin. Okay, then without further ado, I'll introduce our featured speaker for the evening. He is the Chief Content Officer for Capital Public Radio and is a veteran radio journalist. Previously has worked for as a senior producer for the news division of Westwood One, and also as a news reporter for other NPR member stations, including KJZZ in Phoenix. Please welcome Capital Public Radio's Joe Barr.
Everybody, thanks so much for having me. And I guess, should I stay lined up
You're
here?
fine.
Okay. I always got to be
I'll
in
follow
radio,
you.
but I'm cognizant of the camera. I get
You're
that.
good. You were proven.
Yeah, so I'm Chief Content Officer at Capital Public Radio. I oversee all of our programming, news, and music. But I've been a journalist for 30 years, and I'm an enemy of the people. I would just, it's a strange road that we've taken that I say that proudly.
Well, we thank you.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I can just go now. I think that's what we're going to do. So I'll talk for a little bit here, and I like to keep these things casual. So if you have a question as I'm talking, if you want to interrupt the monotony, feel free to raise your hand, and we can just make this a conversation. So I was thinking we could talk a little bit about the media environment overall, because right now it's, I'd say it's the best of times, it's the worst of times in many ways for media and journalism. It's really difficult, a lot of disruption, and yet there's a huge amount of innovation and really interesting things going on, and a lot of dedication too. They're journalists who are out there doing fantastic work under difficult circumstances, and the dedication that they bring to their jobs is just unbelievable. Tell you a little bit about Cap Radio News and what we're doing. I feel really fortunate to have landed here after working in local commercial radio and also at the network level, and then working in public radio in Phoenix, Arizona. It was my first job in public radio, and I came here 17 years ago. And Cap Radio has just been growing consistently and continuously, and right now actually has been a really great time for us, and we're seeing a lot of really good things happening, so I'll tell you about that. You want to know about how we make our editorial decisions. We'll talk a little bit about that. And how do you connect with media organizations? How do you connect with us? I always like having these kinds of conversations because the more input we get from people in the community, the better we are as a news organization. So I want to give you every route to reach us. And I can tell you the best ways not only to connect with us, but other media outlets. And you can tell me what you're looking for. And then some questions at the end, but also just as I'm talking, as I said, feel free to chime in. So I thought I would give you just a few tidbits here about what's happening in the media world. And like I said, disruption is the new normal for all of us. For some people, it's a frightening thing. For other people, I happen to like it. I like the uncertainty of it, but there's so many interesting things happening that it's keeping me engaged, despite the fact that my job could be gone in a year. But I'm enjoying it for now. It's actually not that dire. It's not that bad. My job will be around in a year. So a few really interesting trends are happening right now in the media world. Podcast listening is skyrocketing. How many of you listen to podcasts? Okay, so more than half of Americans over the age of 12 are listening to podcasts now. That's on demand. That means that they aren't tied to a radio or a TV that's going to dictate when they listen to something. And TV on demand usage is way up as well. So people are now deciding when and where they're going to listen to us or read or watch. So consumers have taken ownership. How many of you have a smart speaker, Alexa or Google? So we have a couple. Okay. Yeah, I'm there. Yes, there are privacy issues there for sure, but not for many people. So that's growing rapidly right now with smart speakers. 65 million people in the U.S. have smart speakers. By next year, that's probably going to double. It's the most rapidly adopted platform right now is smart speakers, and that's how people are listening to media. So for audio, for those of us in radio, this is a major platform for us, and people are just saying, listen to NPR, listen to Capital Public Radio. We're listening to exactly what they want to listen to, and then it will come on. That technology is the tip of the iceberg in terms of where everything is going and part of the disruption, because it's all about people taking control of everything in their lives and just simply requesting what they want, wherever they want it, whatever they want. So you walk into your house, in another few years, you're going to say, turn on the lights in the living room. I want to watch Game of Thrones. I want to go onto Facebook and comment about Game of Thrones. I want to watch a video on YouTube. I want to listen to news on Capital Public Radio. You're not going to log into anything. There won't be any friction between platforms. You're just going to get exactly what you want when you want it. It's all going to be mixed up together. And that's one of the challenges we have in the media world, is that the platforms themselves that we have aren't going to matter as much anymore. People are just going to be asking for the content that they want. So that's where the trend is going. An interesting thing that's happening right now, social media use has plateaued and it's actually falling. This might be a good thing, right? I see some people nodding their heads, especially among young people. So Facebook usage is down by 15 million people this year compared to 2018. So what does that mean? There may be some burnout, and there are a lot of discussions now just about the impact of social media on people's lives, on young people. And I think that's part of what's happening is people are really grappling with the implications of social media and what it means in our lives and the impacts, both positive and negative. So the smart speaker, smartphones, and podcasts, those are really some of the big things that are happening right now that are driving the media world. Now, when it comes to journalism, I will say that there has never been more desire or need for journalism. That's the good news. If people didn't want what we do, I would be really scared. I'd be looking for another job. But they want journalism. That's the reality. The problem in the media world and the journalism world is that we just haven't figured out how to monetize these new digital platforms. So newspapers are the example that we all are most aware of because they've been hit the hardest. And AG can chime in here anytime he wants. But newspapers had a really good thing for a long time, 20-30% profit margins. And a lot of that was invested into the journalism that we came to rely on in communities and the big national kinds of stories that you saw from investigative pieces, the Washington Post, New York Times. So those profit margins were actually a very important part of the dynamic that has gone away. So there's no answer as of yet about monetization for the for-profit journalism organizations. Newspapers have lost about half of their staffing in the last decade. That's a huge hit. The Sacramento Bee, as an example, at one point they had more than 300 people in their newsroom. They're down to about, I believe, 45 people in their newsroom. So that's just an example in our market of the hit that journalism has taken. And in terms of newspapers, it really has been in cities of our size and smaller that have seen the biggest declines in journalism organizations, newspapers that have made huge cutbacks or gone out of business altogether. Large papers, New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, are comparatively doing better. They're figuring out models to monetize what they do, but it's not clear that the sustainability is there. So the final word has not been written on those papers. But I was looking, there was a study that came out not too long ago that really delineated the impact of the decline of newspapers and local media. And it came out of Duke University, and they looked at stories by local news organizations in 100 small and mid-sized markets. So it would be markets like Sacramento or mid-size and smaller. And they actually found that there was very little local coverage being produced. So less than half of news stories that were provided by local media were original. That means they were imported from outside that market, a production house or a network. And only 17% were actually about news events within the community. So that's pretty stunning when you think about it. That's what people are now getting, which is very little actual local news. And I know all of you are very interested in politics. And that's really where one of the biggest hits has taken place, because that means city council meetings aren't being covered, county supervisors, the mechanics of local government, which is the foundation of our democracy, it's not being covered. And there have been very specific examples around the country where local newspapers have cut back or gone out of business, and the amount of corruption by elected officials in those cities went up because there wasn't a watchdog. So when we talk about newspapers and journalists being watchdogs, well, they really do that, and it has worked. So that's the challenge. In Sacramento, the Capitol Press Corps it's below half of what it was in its prime. And I was actually going to ask you, AG, what were the numbers in your time?
I don't remember the numbers. I look at it more as a shrinking of the number of outlets that even have people here. And if you look at a map, I've done this lecture in university settings, if you look at a map of California and you look at all the places in California that have no coverage here, it covers most of the map of California. And that means that your representative, if you live in Bishop or Wairika, you have no way of knowing what your representative is doing in Sacramento, how they're voting, what their arguments are on given issues. The papers aren't here to cover that.
Yeah. So this
And you
is,
won't cover it because it's too low. It's too local.
yeah, but that was the important function that newspapers had, and we're trying to grapple with how do we get that back. And I'll tell you a little bit about some of the things that public radio is doing, because we're really positioned. I mean, strategically, we're working to fill the void left by newspapers, and we think we're among the best positioned to do that. And I can tell you more about it. But what that means, just in terms of coverage of state government, is that things happen and nobody knows about them. Elected officials know that there aren't journalists watching them, and I think overall we're seeing there's less and less interest in just from the general population about those kinds of things. And I don't know if it's a chicken or the egg thing. Is it because there's less of it and so they become less interested, or are they less interested and then newspapers and media outlets decide to cut back because it doesn't get big ratings, it doesn't get big readership sometimes. I don't know, but it's a problem. I mean, it's a problem for our democracy. I mean, that's the bottom line, because we need the fourth estate in that function. So we're in a period right now of massive digital disruption and social distortion. And we have on-demand podcasts, social media are all the major trends for news and information. Facebook is a big platform for distribution of news content. We use it, other news outlets use it. That's how people find the stories that we produce. We're no longer in control of our own platforms like we used to be. You tune into the radio, and that was our platform. We owned it. It was our antenna. That's how you got the news. Now we're at the mercy of Google and Facebook and Twitter, all platforms that we don't control that have their own agendas. That's the environment that we're in. Then you have digital upstarts like BuzzFeed and Vice and Vox. Does anybody read those outlets? Yeah. They're doing some really good work. Now, if you read BuzzFeed, there's like really deep journalism contrasted with 10 crazy things your cat did, right? It's there, and that's the same news organization, side by side. So that's they're trying to get clicks, which is what the cat stories do. Then they're trying to do the serious, important journalism. Will they last? I don't know. They're all struggling, so they haven't found a model yet, except to get vast amounts of capital, startup capital. And monetization, that's what it all comes back to. So hopefully we'll figure that one out. And social media, cable news, they've created the echo chambers that we all know. People are listening to just the things that appeal to them. It's provided to them, presented to them. And because in for-profit media, well, this is what I tell people when people say, well, is the media, they're biased, right? And I say they are. But they're biased towards profit. For-profit media, they do what they do because there's money in it. Fox News does what it does because there's a lot of money, not because there's really a conservative agenda. That agenda is at the service of their profits, and they're doing very well with it. CNN is the same way, MSNBC, and you can take that to the New York Times and Washington Post. They're all riding the Trump bump. There's so many stories in the New York Times and the Washington Post about Trump. You can debate whether all of them deserve the coverage that they get, but they get clicks, and that's very important to them for their revenue. So that's the world that we're in at the moment. And in terms of nonprofit media, so that's where I come in. I'm working in public radio, so we're supported by our listeners. More than half of, well, I'm going to give you a fund drive pitch, so I almost went into that. More than half of our listeners support our programs. But that's true. So more than half of the people who listen, or more than half of our budget is made up of membership. So we're supported by our listeners, and it's worked. It's been an amazing, it still works really well. And if you read the Sacramento Bee, I am just so fascinated by the fact that their messaging now sounds like public radio messaging. They're talking about support local journalism. and make a contribution to support local journalism. That's their message. They're trying to copy us because it works. And good luck to them. I think we want the bee to hang on, and if it works for them, great. I don't know that it will. So in the nonprofit media world, there are organizations like Cal Matters. Has anybody heard of them? They're here in Sacramento. They cover California state government and policy. They've hired a lot of bee reporters. They hired Dan Moraine. Gregory Fobb, who used to be the editor of the Sacramento Bee, is on their board, and he helped us start Cal Matters. They're doing really great work covering California state government, so I would urge you to check them out. Investigative work, data-driven work that's really important. And they're doing well. There's the Center for Investigative Reporting. They're based in Emeryville. They're doing really good work. There's a public radio show called Reveal that the Center for Investigative Reporting produces. ProPublica, that's another outlet that's doing a lot of great work. So is there a trend here that I'm identifying that maybe nonprofit is the way to go for journalism? Possibly. I think people are looking at that and wondering if that's where things should go for the most part, and whether actual like for-profit news outlets can be sustained. So for public radio, NPR, Capital Public Radio, we're a member station of NPR. That's our network. Our ratings are at a record high. This is really, it's kind of the golden age for public radio. I've been here for 17 years. I was in it for about 6 years when I was in Phoenix. So I've been doing this in public radio for more than a couple decades. And the audience is really coming to us, and we're very gratified by that. And I think part of it is that we're not driven by profit, we're driven by listener service, audience service. So we're giving people what they want, but not, and what they need also. And there might be some cat videos or stories in there every now and then. But people are coming to us because even through the recession, we didn't cut back on the core of what we do. We tried to maintain that and not cut reporters, and just stay focused on our core mission of serving our audience. So NPR has 38 million listeners a week. That's the biggest network in the country. Radio network. Morning Edition and All Things Considered have 15 million listeners a week. Those are the #1 radio shows. Rush Limbaugh is #2. He's not very happy about that.
On the bottom.
Yes.
Just curious, how do those numbers compare to like cable news? Is NPR have a bigger audience?
I'd have to look up those numbers, like Fox News. I think it's actually the weekly numbers are 38 million, maybe close to what Fox News has for their weekly numbers, but I'd actually have to look that up. Cap Radio we have 500,000 listeners a week to our 7 radio stations. We're in Northern California and Western Nevada. We have 400,000 people who come to our website every month. We're #1 in Morning Drive in Sacramento. When I first came here, we were like number 20. So the audience is coming to us. We had 600,000 of our own produced podcasts were downloaded last year. Wow. And we're relatively new to the podcast realm. We have a statewide network that reaches 3 million listeners a week on 30 radio stations around California. So we're feeding our stories about state government in Sacramento to other stations around California. And the biggest benefit of our network is many public radio stations are small. They're in small markets like in Mendocino County or along the coast, Santa Cruz. Those stations have they're minimal resources, small staffs. They can't do their own local newscasts, but with our content, they're able to do local newscasts. They can fill out the newscasts with our content and have their own local content, so they don't have to do an entire newscast on their own. So public radio in some parts of California and around the country is the only local news outlet for many people. We have, for Cap Radio in particular, specifically, we have 40 people in our content department. And those are the people that you hear, they produce the news, you hear them on the radio. They're on our music station, but our music staff produces stories for the news side. So that's our news department, is 40 people. And I mentioned the B now is down below 50. That's an indicator of how things have changed. If you had told me that dynamic even a few years ago, I would have thought you'd be crazy. But, and we'll be hiring 10 to 15 new people in the next year. So our growth rate is on the fast track. In terms of our coverage, so state government coverage is one of our main beats. It was the first beat that we started many years ago. More recently, we added PolitiFact California, and we're the only radio station that has PolitiFact California. It's newspapers. Actually, we're the only broadcast outlet, TV stations. There was one in Phoenix that had it a couple years ago, but we're the only broadcast outlet that has a PolitiFact. It's all newspapers that have been doing that. So we are PolitiFact California, and we did that because we know our role is to be the watchdog for state government, for elected officials, for candidates, people running for office. And this just, in my mind, it was a natural fit for what we were already doing. And I knew we were doing well with PolitiFact when, I'd say about a month in, a lawmaker from the Central Valley called me up, found my phone number, and just ripped into me about how he hated our fact check. And I thought, we made it. This is good. This is good. I heard him out. He was wrong. He just didn't like the fact check because we said pants on fire. That's the worst rating you can get. And he didn't like that, but it was a lie. So we called him out on that. He didn't like it. And that's part of what we do. I mean, it's highlighting when somebody says something that's wrong, that's a lie, and it's sometimes it's hard to say if somebody's lying or it's just erroneous information, but calling that out. And more often than not now, if it's in a press release or if it's a major error, it will get changed. We've had that happen with politicians. So it's really gratifying when that happens. The other shows and initiatives we have, there's our daily talk show, Insight with Beth Ruyak, and that's an hour program that, thumbs up, thank you. It's off the air for this month. We're doing some work to make it even better. But that's the town hall, civil discussion, the place where people can come together and we can take the news of the day and talk about it. And more that's important. We're just seeing that people are hungry for civil discourse. They want to get away from social media, and so there's great value in that. And then we've really been working on our ability to go into communities in Sacramento, starting in Sacramento, but also in the Central Valley, that don't know who we are, public radio, don't trust us, their voices don't get heard. So as an example, right now we're in the Meadowview neighborhood. We've been there for 4 months with a project focusing on Meadowview, building relationships, building trust, and it's for a podcast that's gonna come out this summer. It's all about Meadowview. I mean, does anybody live in Meadowview? You live in Meadowview. It's a fascinating neighborhood that defies your expectations. Most people only know about it because of Stephen Clark. Mm-hmm. But there is so much more to it than that. But Stephen Clark is part of the story of Meadowview. There's that shooting and everything that happened there. There's a whole fabric of a story that we're telling in a podcast and a documentary and with multimedia content. But it's part of an almost 2-year project that we're doing there, being in the community. And that's the future of journalism for us, is that kind of process, because more and more we see that people don't respond to journalists just parachuting in, getting a story, and then leaving. Can't do that. There's less trust than I've seen in a long time in many communities, and so it's really important for us to build relationships over time. So that's part of what this project does. So it's called The View From Here, Making Meadowviews. That's my little plug. And that's the name of the podcast. And the website and the community engagement activities and everything are going live tomorrow, as a matter of fact. So hope you'll check it out. We're really proud of it. And I'll just tell you that one of the great things that happened as a result of that project and all of our time spent in Meadowview was when the district attorney announced her decision not to prosecute the officers. And it was on a Saturday, which was kind of odd. But we mobilized and we did 3 hours of special coverage that day. And we were able to get people from Meadowview, the community, to come in and come on our air. They wanted to. They wanted to talk to us. They wanted our listeners to hear us. And they wouldn't talk to other media outlets. They didn't trust them. But they came in to talk to us, and we got their voices on the air. So there were perspectives that we heard from that community that our listeners heard that nobody else did. And it was because of the groundwork that we laid for this documentary podcast series that it really paid off on a huge story, which we were hoping it would do, but we weren't sure, but it did. So that's the value of that kind of engagement and where journalism needs to go. And then, you know, the last thing I'd say about public radio and Capital Public Radio is we are positioning ourselves to try and fill that void for newspapers. We can't replicate. We're not going to have 300 people working at Capital Public Radio, but we can try to fill the void in the community as that nexus, that town hall, the place where people go for factual journalism, for lifestyle, entertainment kinds of things, because we also have that part of what we do. And that's what newspapers did, you know? So in California, all the major public radio stations are working together. We're creating a hub for California where we're all working together to strengthen our coverage and fundraise and bring in revenue to support more reporters, more editors, and especially in news deserts and smaller stations around California, it's going to support more journalists going to those rural parts of California that don't get covered, that don't get heard. So that's a really exciting thing. And then that's actually the first step of a big national reorganization of all of NPR and all of the stations that we're working on, where we're going to be grouped into these hubs and much more regionalized, and ideally the coverage is going to be deeper and stronger, and with the goal of, at least in California, our goal is for our reporting to reflect the demographics of California. We're the most diverse state. We're the future of the rest of the country when you look at California. So that's how we need to position ourselves. So it's really exciting to be working on that and growing journalism as I watch my friends in other news organizations getting laid off or cutting back. So we feel really fortunate to be in a position to be able to build something big that hopefully, why are we doing this? It's because democracy needs journalism. And that's the bottom line for us. That's why we're doing this. It has to succeed because there really isn't anybody else, as far as we can see, that is positioned with a national network of journalists. There are 1,500 public radio journalists around the country if you add us all up as a network, which we haven't done before. That's a huge army of journalists that, if they're more coordinated and efficient, and if we're better prepared to hire them and create pipelines for young journalists, which is what this is all about, and that may be hopefully the new backbone of journalism. But we'll see. It's still, the tale is still being written. So, any questions? Just, yes.
Yes, I was kind of surprised and actually a little disappointed that you didn't mention at all the actual threats to freedom of the press in this country. When you have a demagogue in chief who attacks the press on a daily basis, when you have a government which singles out journalists who go to report at the border and they have to go through 3 security checks. This was a story in the Guardian today. I think your view of Fox News, and I would also add Sinclair Communications, is a lot more malevolent than you make it out to be. So.
Yeah, well, I hear what you're saying. I mean, we can disagree on the words and characterizing Fox News and Sinclair. The bottom line for them is profits, and conservatism is the mechanism that allows them to make their profits. And everything that goes along with that, creating a culture, creating the connections with conservative lawmakers, everything they do is part of a culture that benefits them monetarily. So I would just say that malevolent. You know, I wouldn't go so far as to characterize it like that, but I think the end is not good, I guess, is we can agree on that. In terms of the risks to journalists, yeah, it's and also the eroding environment of freedom of the press. We saw that in Sacramento a couple weeks ago when there were the journalists who were arrested at the protests. Something like that hadn't happened in my memory in Sacramento. And my concern is that it's part of a larger environment where law enforcement is seeing that they can get away with those kinds of things. I think they're pushing the limits in some cases. We're still trying to understand exactly what happened here in Sacramento, but we're at a point now where we're talking with the police department to clarify the rules of the road, and it's an interesting conversation. And we did a story on this, but their goal is they want us to identify ourselves if they're going to be arrest made for covering a protest, and then they'll take us to someplace safe. So there's the problem. So it sounds good, but it's actually not good. And we're seeing this in cities around the country. I hear this from my friends in journalism elsewhere, where there's just, and around the world, where journalists are being killed, they're being detained with no repercussions. And so we're seeing basically the bar is being moved. And where this is going, I don't know, but it is very concerning. So that's our situation right now. And I do think that the president has created an environment where people feel they can do things. He hasn't directed it specifically, but he creates an environment, a culture, and that's what's problematic. And I don't say that as a political statement, I say it just as a fact of what's happening and what we're seeing on the ground. Yeah?
How can we support you? What can we do to help you in your goal to create a more inclusive environment for reporting to about local community events and or politics?
Well, there are a few things. I would say, a big thing is having a pipeline into journalism and getting young people to go into the job. There's still a lot of interest in journalism right now. And a young person who was an intern at our station a few years ago, we were talking, and I was lamenting, the state of journalism. And he said, that's not, I don't know anything about what your world was like when you were younger. I just know what it is now, and I want to be a journalist. And I thought, wow, that is so great. I mean, he's coming into journalism as it is now. He doesn't have all the baggage that I have, thinking about the way it was in the good old days. He wants to be a journalist right now, and he knows it's tough, but he still wants to do it. I just think it's amazing. We need those pipelines, but we need people to also talk about journalism and talk to young people about it. And that's why I go to schools. I talk to people about journalism being a noble profession and how important it is and how it's about it's a foundation of democracy. And more kids are getting that. One of the great things about PolitiFact California is that we know from a lot of audience surveys, young people, millennials, they love accountability journalism. Mm-hmm. They love PolitiFact. That's brought in a lot of younger people to listening to public radio because of PolitiFact, because of that fact-checking. So that's one thing. If you have kids, grandkids, and you understand the value of journalism, and you're watching, listening, reading, creating that, when I grew up, my dad and I read the New York Times together, like it was a shared thing. We would watch Walter Cronkite on the news. Yeah. It was a shared thing. We've kind of lost that in a lot of ways. And so I think if everybody, that's like this kind of shared thing of, how can we bring journalism back into our lives and showcase it for young people. The other thing is, you have a fund drive coming up in a couple of weeks, so the support is the big thing. It all comes down to, I mean, it's the money that allows us to do what we do, whether it's for-profit or nonprofit. And we're finding new revenue streams, and we're finding a very loyal audience, which is great. But that void is so deep and so big for us to be filling. So that's that would be another thing. And just listening and reading. Yeah.
Backing up to what you were saying about the police here in the protest, they want to take you someplace safe? Is this a new policy? What is that?
Yeah, it's a new policy, and it hasn't been finalized yet, but it's out there. So I'm not speaking out of turn in negotiations or anything, but their idea is that they would remove us so that the journalists wouldn't be arrested, and if they stayed, you could be arrested. That was the part of the policy.
How are you supposed to report on
Well, not well. So the discussions are ongoing, but that's.
Is it a story so that the public can respond to this?
Yeah, in fact, we did a story on it. It was last week when the first discussions took place. There are more to come. And so it's out there. And the Bee was part of that, KCRA, Cap Radio. So the major news outlets in the community were at this discussion with the police department. I'm hoping that this will go in the right direction. There's still discussions. But we have to talk more. And as it was presented, that's obviously not acceptable. And nobody's going to go with the officer to a safe place. So that's nothing we'll do. Yeah.
Did they say a charge would be arrested?
They didn't say. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You in the back. Yep.
I wondered on a different tack what you thought about the idea of restoring the fairness doctrine or something of that nature on the national level to try to move some of the news outlets away from the entertainment / fan fiction sort of areas that they're at right now.
Yeah.
Because I remember much of my childhood, like you're watching the news, and that kind of stuff was not a thing. The fiction model was not a thing. And I'm just curious what your take on getting away from that would look like.
That's an interesting one. On one hand, I could say, yeah, maybe it's a good idea. On the other hand, the business model for media, for journalism, has changed a lot since then. There's deregulation and consolidation, and you've got these monolithic corporations that own a lot of stations, and there's so much of a drive towards profit now. I mean, that is the singular goal of these organizations. More than it always was, but CBS with Edward R. Murrow and their heritage of great news, that was not a profit center for them in the 50s and 60s. There was a decision, and it started in the 70s, and then in the 80s it kind of hastened, but then it became a revenue center, a profit center. News became a profit center.
Well, it's obviously going to have to be put upon them. They don't want that at this point. But
Yeah. I would have to think about it, but I think there might be merit to it, just because we're not seeing on individual outlets, we're not seeing that balance. We're not hearing all voices that we should hear.
Well,
But
in some cases, total fiction.
What do you think? Do you think?
Me?
Yeah.
I do think the fairness doctrine would help, at least clarify what allows you to call yourself a news outlet, right? If you're telling, if you're saying the sky is purple and it's obviously not, maybe you're not news. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? At least to narrow in the scope of what can call itself news, I think would help.
It would be an interesting study to do, and then just to see how that would play out with bloggers and there's all these new approaches to journalism now, and I don't know how that would play out, but it actually would be an interesting thing to think about.
We got time for maybe one or two more.
Okay.
What do you think the best way for the public to comment on this issue, sorry to yo-yo, about taking journalists to a safe place is?
We're going to be reporting on it, so I I would let this play out a little bit more because we're still talking. And if it ends up in a bad place, you're definitely going to hear about it from all of us. And then I think it's a matter of letting elected officials know, letting the police chief know that it's not acceptable. I mean, that's what we do, right? And that's what democracy is about. So I think that would be the next step when we reach that point. We're not there yet. And I hope we won't get there. I hope they're gonna fix this in a way so that it works.
And what would that look like? What are you and others at Cap Radio suggesting?
Well, my question is, why do we need this at all? I mean, it's never been an issue before, and journalists have covered demonstrations and been part of that. It's just been part of what we do. So why is it now we need to identify ourselves, and why do we need to be taken somewhere? I mean, we've always covered these kinds of things, and this hasn't happened. So I think it's really questioning the value. Why are they even proffering that as an idea? So I think it really should remain the same. Journalists shouldn't be arrested, and they should be allowed to cover the story that's happening and not be taken anywhere by the police. So that's what I'm hoping we'll get to, and if we don't, we'll take it from there. Okay, did I cover everything, or at least enough things? Okay, thank you.
Okay, now just have some business to discuss. Actually, we're going to reminisce about what we did last week. We had our first, and I say first because I think this is going to be something we do again. We had our first pizza and politics event. We got together. There was a pretty good turnout. We got together at Mountain Mike's Pizza in the Pocket neighborhood last week. We heard from Jiggy Effelingham from Indivisible's national team. She gave us a great overview of how to talk to state lawmakers and how to lobby for policies at the state level. Is also a good quick overview of the state lawmaking process. So it was really interesting, and there was pizza and there was beer, and it was we provided it for you. So it was a really good event, and I think it went pretty well. So I've decided we'll do this again. We'll have another pizza and politics, and I also just came up with donuts and democracy. So I have to do that on a Saturday or Sunday morning sometime. So stay tuned for that. It's good to have kind of a socially focused event every once in a while, but also we'll include learning opportunities. But there was an offshoot of that event because we talked about the Courage campaign. I don't know if anyone is or isn't familiar with the Courage campaign, but a high-level overview. It's a group of progressive advocacy group here in California that for the past few years has issued a report card and a grade to every single state lawmaker. So just a few of ours here. Kevin McCarty, if you live north of Florin Road, got 100. He did a great job. He came and talked to us last year, so we know he's a good guy. Jim Cooper, who's the assembly member south of Florin Road in Elk Grove, did not get 100. He got like a 26, I think, was his score.
15.
Oh, 15? Was it 15?
Got
Okay.
enough anyway.
It was not good.
Don't give him the extra.
Okay. And then Richard Pan, the state senator, I think he was in the 80s somewhere. We have some other lawmakers around here that didn't do so great. But we had a little offshoot event on Wednesday. We talked about it, and then on Friday, a small group of people actually went to the state capitol and handed out report cards to each of these lawmakers. Did you want to talk about that at all, Julie, or did you have anything interesting happen?
No, I do want to thank, we had 3 people come along with Ellen and I. So we had Sarah, and we had Barbara and Louise. And there she
Louise.
is.
Hi.
You came in late. So it kind of turned out well. We had 5 legislators that we delivered their Courage campaign scores, and each one of us was able to say we're a constituent and hand them their score. So it turned out we had a nice group. Again, we did Cooley, Cooper, Kylie, McCarty, and Pan. They all, some of them weren't real happy that we were there. They didn't like the grade that they got, but they were courteous. They accepted it. They said they would pass it on to the legislator. And so we were in and out within 40 minutes. It was Friday afternoon, so the only person in the office was the person who was answering the door and left to answer the phone. So it was pretty quick and easy, but we got it done. So.
And we are looking for volunteers who are interested in participating in Courage campaign events in the future. What exactly the scope of those events are is something that we can work with you on and figure out what you're interested in. So if you are interested in doing some of that, like interacting with our state lawmakers and maybe doing a little research on votes and things like that, please let us know, or Julie or Ellen or myself, just come up to us and let us know after the meeting.
Or on the federal level.
Oh, right, yeah, and they do some work on the federal level. I don't think they issued the full reports for everyone this year, but it looks like they are working on issuing grades for California's senators and representatives at the federal level. So there's a lot of opportunity there. And we'd love to have anyone who's interested in volunteering. I do have a few other announcements that some folks have asked to make. First, we have a text event going on in Petaluma, is it?
Yeah.
Did you want to talk about that?
I'm actually going to a training in Petaluma. It's a full-on training on how to reach every representative that you have. And what it does is it gets directly to them, and we're trying to develop a group of people that are text bankers. I'm getting the training so that I can train others. They've asked me to bring other people if they're interested. I have 3 seats in my car, 1 is committed. If 2 more people would like to participate, I'd love to have you along. And what we would do is put together a training, bring a lot of people together, train them on the texting, which you will learn is super easy once you get it on your phone and your system. And then we would also train you on all of the other tools that are available to communicate with your legislators, local and federal, on a regular basis. I mean, today I probably spoke to Jim Cooper twice. I actually sent something to the president. I did something for Dianne Feinstein 5 times, Camilla Harris 7, and it took me maybe 30 minutes. So what I'm saying is that what I'd like to do is to create a situation where I can train you on all these tools, and then we get everybody involved. Yes?
A clarifying question. Are you saying texting or
Texting, it's both texting and it's really in a form of texting, yeah.
And so just curious, how many people did some text banking during the election last year? I actually had a training at my house, and we had some other events. It's a way to reach a lot of voters
Really fast.
Really fast, yeah.
Well, you reach voters too. I mean, that's one of the key things with the texting, as you get closer to the election, is you actually physically talk to voters. And you text them, and they actually text back. They communicate, to ask questions and so forth. And I was involved in Texas, North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, and I forget Nevada. And those were the ones that I was assigned to, and I probably did maybe 15,000, 20,000 texts. Now that sounds like a lot of time, but you're looking at maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours, there where you spend your time is answering questions. Because especially in Georgia, a lot of them were asking, where do I go? What do I do if I can't? They won't let me vote. They say I'm not on the roll. So we had answers for them. We told them who to talk to, where to go, and how to do it. And we're able to get these people moving in the right direction. And that's really rewarding. I do believe, and I wasn't the only one involved within the group that I worked with. We had 200 people. Think about how many texts they did. We moved the needle just by that. So even if you're doing just a few, there were a lot, it moves the needle because you're actually having a one-on-one conversation with an individual that's making a decision on who they're going to vote for and why. That's one factor. And the other factor is that the other side of it is you can actually communicate with your legislator about how unhappy you are about some of the things they're saying and doing. So you got a two-pronged approach. And in doing that, you can actually participate on a one-on-one basis in your home. You never leave your house. Well, you could be in your car.
Except to go to Petaluma.
Yeah, well, that's because I'm going to the training. But
Okay, actually, could you remind everybody what day that is? And
it's the 30th of, it's on a Saturday. It's the end of the month. It's March 30th. And I will leave at 7:30 in the morning. It is a all-day thing. because I'll be spending a couple hours there getting the full-on training, and then of course it's 2 hours to drive there and 2 hours to come back. And the reason why I'm doing this is because the person who is putting on the training is in Petaluma. If this is successful and I have some people that come along, she may actually come here and do a training here. So I'm asking for your help, and also anybody that would like to participate.
And there are worse things that you can do than drive to Sonoma
Yeah.
County in the spring. It's
Yeah.
If you're interested, let me give you a way to reach me. My phone number is 916-202-7245. And all you have to do is say, I'm interested in going with you to Petaluma, and then I'll give you the information.
Who did you say is sponsoring the training?
It's Petaluma Indivisible. Her name is Stephanie Wilkinson. My closest friend Kathy Andrews will also be there, and she's also part of the training.
Thank you very much.
916-202-7245.
Quickly, yeah.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Great, and then Ellen Chapman has a couple of announcements to make as well.
Yeah, I'm gonna do my own little mini pledge drive here. So, I'm your treasurer, and so I just wanted to let you know that what we're kind of spending the money on. If you donate to Indivisible through, on our website, you can click and donate through Indivisible National, and they funnel the money back to us. And it used to be that our fearless leader here paid the rent for this room every month out of his own pocket, but over the last few months we've taken that on, so we're paying for that out of the donations that you give us. So that's our main expense now, and then of course anytime we print things up or buy buttons or whatever, that's the kind of, but right now our main expense is just paying the rent on this. So I wanted to encourage you, if you wanted to donate money to Indivisible Sacramento, please do it through the website. There's a little widget thing you can donate through. And if you're gonna do, it's great if you do the monthly donation, but if you're just gonna do a one-time donation, do it in April, because Indivisible National is giving us matching funds during the month of April. So double your impact in April.
Is that through PayPal, or what is the?
Through Act Blue.
It does through Act Blue,
Oh.
yeah. And so I wanted to alert you to that if you're at all inclined to donate, do it now and do it through the website.
Is that the only way?
So yes, we used to just put a bucket out, right, and put some money in the bucket, but that's actually problematic for us to handle because we don't have an Indivisible checking account, and so it's in a drawer in my office, and I would just much rather that it gets funneled through Indivisible National, because then every month we're making statements to them, and it's very transparent, and I'm much more comfortable with that. So.
And they take care of
laundering
FEC.
money. I know someone who does.
They take care of the FEC reporting and everything, and make sure we're not spending it on anything we shouldn't spend it on. So it's a good relationship. To
And
have that.
our expenses are fairly streamlined, but we do have now this regular expense that we've taken on. And I also just wanted to let you know, this is also on the website. Everything's on the website, folks. There's a fund called Unify or Die, and it's fundraising that's going on now through Act Blue. It's supported by Swing Left and also Crooked Media, and they're raising money right now for whomever wins the Democratic nomination. So whoever comes out of the primaries as the Democratic candidate, they're going to have a big glob of money to give them heading straight into the general. So that seems to be very much in line with our thinking that we're going to support whatever Democrat comes out on the other end. So if you're interested in that, there's information about how to donate to that on the website as well. So, thank you.
So one last thing here, Ellen mentioned that everything is on our website, indivisiblesacramento.com. That's not quite true, because we also have a Twitter account. It's at IndivisibleSac. Anyone who's on Twitter and wants to follow us. We promise to generate some amazing content in the weeks and months to come, even though we're just getting started with that. All right, does anyone else have anything they'd like to say or ask? Or yes?
Yeah. I didn't quite make it to the beginning, couldn't sign up, but I wanted to partly remind you, probably most of you know that we're holding sessions at the County Democratic Office, 1033 voters for the do-over.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
so that sounds like a great opportunity to get some practice at phone banking. We're going to be a phone banking army next year. And for those who haven't done it, it sounds a little daunting at first, but honestly, once you do it, it's fine. It's kind of fun. So this would be a great way to get started if you haven't done it before, or keep your skills fresh if you did it last year during the election and don't want to forget how to do it. All right. Anybody else have any announcements or questions? Or okay, well then I won't keep you. Have a great month, everyone. Take care.